Thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. Our topic today is how to write a great solution report. So my goal for the next hour for all of you is to share as many tips as I can about writing a clear and concise solution report that will be as effective as possible. Before we begin, a couple standard announcements for the webinar. All audience will be muted during the webinar to reduce background noise since we have a lot of folks here and a lot of content to share. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and you can share your questions using the Skype chat window, which you can access by clicking on the chat bubble icon. If you're accessing this through your desktop, the bubble icon should be on the bottom left of the Skype window, and if you're on your mobile app for Skype, it should be on the top right. So since I anticipate we have a number of new inventors here, I'll give a very quick summary of Xinova. Xinova is an open innovation R&D platform for corporations of all sizes. We engage with our partner to help define their problems and their needs as a first step. And these problems are then presented in two ways to our network. The first of these is called a request for invention, or an RFI, and the second is called a request for application, which is an RFA. The response to an RFI is a solution report, which is the topic of this webinar. The response to an RFA is actually an opportunity report. We won't be discussing RFAs or opportunity reports in this presentation, but there will be a webinar on this in the future. After presenting problems to our network, we then engage all of you, our inventors, to iterate, guide a scope of solutions, and you submit solutions to Xinova. We then curate these solutions, review them, and present them to our partner, who will then select a solution, a number of solutions for further development. So the goal of today's presentation is to focus on this middle piece, which is to submit a quality solution report. Before getting into solution report, I highly recommend requesting pre-submission feedback. And this is a great way to save time and effort by checking in with us early. You should receive a response within a few business days from us if you use our intercom, which is accessed by going to an RFI page. And at the corner of the RFI page, or really anywhere on our website, you'll notice this small hexagonal icon, which you can click to for a pop-up chat window. On this window, you can ask us any questions about inventing with us, the solution report template, or getting feedback for any idea that you might have. You can also send us questions via email to your IDM or your Innovation Development Manager. Again, this is a great way to get some quick feedback about your idea before committing to writing a whole solution report. So before getting into the details of the solution report, there's a question of what we're looking for from a report. And the goal of this report is to describe your idea clearly and thoroughly enough to convince reviewers of three things. The first is technical feasibility. So whether the idea works and whether we understand how the idea works. Comparative advantage, or the novelty of the idea and how it compares to existing solutions. And commercial viability, so whether it would be possible to implement the solution by our partner. If you can cover all of these in your solution report, and we write our template to make this as easy as possible for you, it greatly increases your chances of selection and the speed through the review process. So often one of the causes of a solution report going more slowly through our process is because one of these questions isn't answered. So if you can answer these in your solution report, that greatly increases your chances of success. So as hopefully many of you know, we do have a new template for our solution report, and this can be accessed through our website. It was uploaded in the last month, and so you should download the new template, and there are a few changes to this template. As always, it begins with addressing a specific problem in the RFI. After that point, the overall flow of the solution report is a little different from before. We now begin with a different outline beginning with what, the idea is, so your summary of the solution, and then the why rather than the how. So the why includes the technical landscape and the comparative advantages of your solution, followed by the details of the invention or how the solution works. Previously, this was then followed by a markets address section, and after feedback from many of you, we have replaced this with a section called Considerations for Commercialization. This is new, and I will discuss this in more detail. And lastly, of course, we have the references, and all of these should be filled out. All 6 sections should be filled out for the solution report to be considered complete. So the most important thing is knowing your audience in the solution report. And to know your audience, you need to write a very clear solution report because our audience is quite wide. So it begins with the internal review. And this is the Xinova review team, which can include folks who have technical background in the RFI or in your solution, folks with a business background or with a legal background. And because there's a diverse background, many different people will be reviewing your solution, and so your report should be as clear as possible to all backgrounds. If it makes it to the next stage, it will be presented to the customer. So the RFI sponsor will then read your solution report. In some cases, such as in software solutions, the solution report itself may not be presented directly to the customer. Instead, you may be asked to help generate PowerPoint summary slides of the solution report instead. And then if your solution report is selected, Xinova's patent development team will also be reviewing it. So as you can see, there's a very wide audience for your solution report. And so it's important to be concise and clear where possible. At this stage, when you write your solution report, it's not necessary to use any patent language or legalese. And in fact, I discourage it because it's more important to be clear and easy to understand, since patents are inherently designed to be a little more difficult to understand. And lastly, you always want to submit an edited professional report. So remember, your solution report is where you're selling us your idea. You want to make sure that your report reflects the best of your idea. So the very first section of the solution report is, of course, the problem. And this is where you want to address a very specific problem in the solution report that you're focusing on. So RFIs tend to describe they may be very specific, or they may describe a very broad problem. And we select a number of solutions in response to the RFI. And so your solution may address just one particular point in the solution. So in order to write an effective problem statement, you want to focus on the most compelling problem. And to help you do this, you should look at the Invention Suggestions page of the RFI document. In this page, you'll find a section that will tell you what is in scope, so which solutions are, what kind of solutions the RFI sponsor is looking for, as well as what is out of scope. And if your solution does fall out of scope, we will reach out to you to see if it can be redefined, but often solutions that are out of scope will necessarily be rejected. So it's really important to pay attention to this specific page and to make sure you define your problem so it falls within scope. The next section is the summary, and arguably this is the most important piece of the solution report because this is the piece that is most likely to be read by all of your audience members. And so the summary of a solution has to be brief. So it's a maximum of 150 words, and so you do need to be very concise. In this, you want to focus on what's new about your solution. So what does only your solution provide? And in this particular example, you'll notice that they describe that their solution provides a novel adsorbent material to selectively remove mercury, and then they go on to describe what that novel material is. And so focusing on what's novel will help you be more concise in your solution, in your summary. You also want to use correct terminology or keywords whenever possible. So the summary is really important not only because of the wide audience, but because it's used to guide our literature search. And this is important for you as well as us. So an inaccurate or a summary that uses vague terms or doesn't describe the solution very well can lead to delays during the review process or rejections, since we cannot accurately place your solution in the context of the technical landscape. So it's important to use correct words wherever possible. And lastly, remember that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you're short on words and have a very complex solution to describe, you might consider using one high-level figure to convey that solution. So in the case of designs or processes, especially complex processes, it can be more helpful to use a figure instead of describing it in detail. So a couple example figures here. If you have a design, for example, of a spill-proof bottle, and you describe it as a container that is squeezed to fill a top section for drinking, that gives you an idea of what the bottle might look like, but even better would be a drawing of the figure that explains exactly what it looks like, and this hopefully is way clearer than the description. Alternatively, you might have a very complex process that you're describing, a new process. And so on the right, you can see here a diagram outlining all of the steps. And this is a very nice visual way for explaining the flow of your process and each of the important steps. And you can highlight what specifically is new and where it fits into existing processes. The next section, called Technical Landscape, is a slightly newer section. It's a combination of a couple of the previous sections, including background and looking at the technical landscape. So this includes asking why your solution should be developed. So when you're thinking of your idea, what are the key benefits to this idea, particularly in context of existing ideas? You'll want to include your scientific background here. So this is a little different from what's included in, say, an academic paper. The focus of this is to describe literature that has inspired your solution or technically supports your solution. And so if it's needed to understand your solution by the reviewers, then you should include it here. I think a great way of displaying your information in this section is using a table. So a table can be very effective to compare your idea with existing ideas. So for example, in this very generic table, you can compare your idea with the cost, if that is a crucial function, a crucial aspect, the function of your idea, maybe sustainability is an important factor. And so across a variety of important factors, you can compare your idea against existing ideas. The next section is the meat of your paper. So these are the details of the invention or how the solution works. And because it's the meatier section, it can be easy to write a very lengthy report. So when it comes to length, you want to explain all of the features of the invention in an organized way. So if it's very complex, it has a lot of pieces, it's helpful to use headers and organize it well. You don't want to leave aspects open to interpretation. So this is one place where we often have to delay review of a solution and go back to you as the inventor and ask some questions because it wasn't very clear how some part of the invention was meant to work. But I highly emphasize, again, being concise. So if you can explain a concept in fewer words, that's most helpful to us. Remember, some of your reviewers do not have time to read 20 or 30 pages necessarily. And so if it's possible to be a little bit more concise, that would be the best way to convey your invention. Figures are a great way to guide your write-up. So again, with complex solutions, with designs, with software flow, logic flows, you would want to use figures to guide your write-up and explain each of the different pieces. For example, if the design is important, you draw it out with labels on the figure itself. If it's a process, you can use a diagram or flowchart. And these do not need to be professional figures. Drawings are perfectly acceptable. Next, feasibility is, of course, again, one of the three most important things about the solution report that I mentioned at the beginning. So a great way to show feasibility is to focus on the science to convince reviewers. So when you are demonstrating a new invention, If it hasn't been tested previously, you can instead describe it theoretically using science, using some previous literature to demonstrate something similar that has worked, or other theoretical explanations that can convince us that eventually, when we develop it, there's a high chance of it working. So I want to push that proof of concepts or prototypes are not required by in the solution report. They think there is a misconception that for certain types of solutions it's required, but it's not always required. A plan is more important than necessarily having a prototype. So if you can describe a proof of concept plan, that can help demonstrate feasibility, and this should be included in the next section. So in the details, you'll also describe how your invention would be used. And so there might be very many different ways for implementing your solution. You will want to focus on the one clear and compelling example of how your invention can be best implemented. With that example, there may be some pitfalls, and so you can describe other ways as well. They should be included later on in the section, often under what's called solution extensions. So these can be other ways to implement your solution if the best example does not work. So now we come to the new section of our solution report template, which is commercialization. The key part of this section is getting from your idea to a product. So during development, there are many questions that we want to answer. How do you get from the idea to the product? These include asking what technical gaps must be filled. So for example, getting from your idea to an actual commercial product might involve relying on some technical aspects that do not currently exist or aren't improved sufficiently to work with your solution. So you will want to mention that those are gaps that need to be filled. As I mentioned before, this is where you would talk about your proof of concept plan. So what are some key milestones that you would recommend for the proof of concept or prototype? And lastly, for especially our newer RFIs, we will have a specific section in the RFI called Considerations for Commercialization. In this section, we'll outline important factors that should be considered when looking at your new invention. So they could include cost of the invention, the targeted market, the size of it, or how it will be implemented. And so when you look at those considerations, in this section of the solution report, you should describe how these will be considered by your particular invention. You'll also, in this section, have the chance to declare if you're interested in participating in a project to demonstrate proof of concept. So if your solution is selected, you can be involved in the next step of further developing your solution. The last piece of the solution report is references, and I want to emphasize that this part is not optional. It's really important not only for patenting purposes if your solution is selected, but also because this is where reviewers can get a broader understanding of your solution report and is key for feasibility as well. So you'll want to list a reasonable number of references. So having 100 isn't necessarily helpful to us. 4 to 15 or 20 is a good number. And you'll want to include references that you personally have seen and read. And that way, if we have questions about these references, we can ask you about them, and you'll have a good understanding of this as well. Your sources should all have been referenced directly in previous sections. So as you'll notice, they're numbered 1 through 5, or however many references you have, and these should be cited previously. If they're not, you may want to include some what's called general background, information that's just helpful for the reviewer to understand the overall solution. And lastly, we highly recommend using electronic references or patents so that we have access to them if needed, and you should maintain copies of the references that you include so that if we need access to them, we can request that from you. So with that, I'll go to our final messages about the solution report. So again, I'll keep pushing that you should seek out pre-submission feedback. Again, use that little chat icon at the bottom of the website, bottom right corner. Remember that you should always do your own literature search to check the novelty of your idea before writing. This can be a quick search, but it's crucial to determine if your idea has been done before or not. You should review your solution report multiple times before submitting it. And after you have submitted your solution, be sure to seek post-submission feedback. So make sure you understand, especially if it's not been selected, why it has not been selected, and we will do our part to make sure we get that feedback to you. And finally, it is a learning process, so our solution report often is improved. We just upload a new template, and we're looking for ways to make it easier and more efficient on your part to give us your ideas and to share with us what you have in mind. So with that, I will open this to any questions.